Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
And we're live. There it is.
Happy Saturday, everyone.
Happy Saturday. We are Bigfoot and the Bunny. I am Chris Carr.
And I am Kristen Johnson.
And our video probably hung at the end of that again. I don't know why.
We'll fix it.
But we're going to fix it.
We'll figure it out.
It's not a big deal.
Courtney Peterson said hi to everybody, and she's off to share it.
Oh, and I see Robert Driggy. I hope I said that right. Your last name. Good afternoon from New Mexico. Yeah, actually, I got to speak to you soon because we have another show starting soon. It's going to be on Thursdays, and it's going to be called the Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. And it's going to be tied back to a podcast that Chris and I have done, but have not touched in a while. It's been sitting for almost a year, but there are a bunch of episodes out there. And if you're into podcasts, I do suggest you use whatever outlet you get them from. Look up Dark Horse Paranormal. You'll see that, but there's also going to be a live show now on Thursdays.
Every other Thursday.
At least every other Thursday, maybe every Thursday. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's going to be starting as soon as this week. We just kind of got to go ahead with this, so we're still working now. Obviously,
so we will be speaking to Mr. Robert.
Confused, but we wanted to give a quick shout out to our friend Gail Heisen, who has a podcast as well, Small, Medium, and Large. Hey, Gail, and you join a lot of our shows and wanted to say hello because your show this week was awesome.
Yes.
With Russell Todd. And we were like, that is so cool.
We loved it.
And,
so you're doing a wonderful
awesome
job.
Love Gail. And I'll give a shout out to our friend Shay Carroll, who is at Parafest Maine this weekend, set up for Paranormal Buzz Radio. Hey, Shay.
Hi, Shay.
She is part of our dream team.
Yes, she is.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. She named that too. It's great.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah.
So, anyways, guys, we have an awesome show for you. And I know I say that every week, but we're just so lucky to be able to talk to these people.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is truly a gift. This week we're welcoming back to Bigfoot the Bunny, Robert Lindsy Milne. He is a psychic, intuitive counselor, teacher, healer, and life coach. He is also the host of a new podcast, which is amazing, called My Side of the Crystal Ball.
Yes.
And he's going to tell us about that and a whole lot of great stuff. He's recognized across the continent as one of the most insightful psychic, intuitive counselors of his time. At a very young age, Robert started working as a psychic intuitive, doing readings at the Cosy Tea Room, in the tea rooms. And I remember this story, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. Basically, when he was a kid. And at the same time, battling serious literacy issues, he managed to overcome his disabilities and traveled the world giving insight with his psychic intuitive sessions to tens of thousands of people. So let's bring him right on. Hey,
hello.
Robert.
Great to see you.
Welcome back to Bigfoot and the Bunny.
I'm so happy to see you all. I was just thinking, when I hear all the things that you were saying, and I'm thinking, who is that person? Oh, it's me. Oh, that's right. This is really fun.
You are the guy.
You are the man.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been on our show a couple of times. We've talked about a lot of things. Maybe we want to just give the audience, because our show has grown and we're on different networks and stuff, a little bit of insight into your childhood, just quickly, and how you came to become a psychic, because this is a really interesting story. I love this story.
Well, I've been a professional psychic, so that means my job. And my job in the way I see being a professional psychic is you go to work every day. That's my job. And that is what I do. And I've been a professional psychic for 56 years. And I started at the Cosy Tea Room. I was 15 and a half years old. And it was the way I got off the streets. I was homeless at that time. And it was the way that I got off the street. So I've always picked things up, even as a child, and especially as a child. I can remember first one of my first awarenesses. I came home from school one day. I was maybe about 5 or 6 years old. And that would have been in 1955 because I'm getting up there in years. And when I came home for lunch, I said to my mother, Grandma Harris died today. And Grandma Harris actually was my great-grandmother, and she lived in London, England, and I'd only seen her once in my life. So out of the blue, I say Grandma Harris died today. My mother got really angry, yelled at me, and hit me for saying bad things. The next night at dinner, my mother and father, myself and my sister were sitting down, and my mother said to my dad, Grandma Harris died yesterday. And I thought my dad was going to get angry with my mother for saying bad things, but to my astonishment, they just talked about it. And I noticed that happened a lot, and often with the things that I saw, I would get hit for. Uncle Harold, that wasn't Aunt Sally. Who was that woman? That one got me hit for sure. So throughout my early days, I was seeing things and not realizing that I was seeing things that other people weren't. And when I was around 9 and a half, my father took me to an NHL Stanley Cup game. And it was between Boston and Toronto. It was 1957. And it was between Boston and Toronto. And the series was tied 1-1. The game was tied 1-1. And it went into overtime. And when the teams came on the ice for the first overtime period, I saw number 17 with Toronto Maple Leafs. His name was Gary Eman. And I knew he was going to score. I knew it. It was, and it was so real, it was hard to distinguish that it was going to happen, and it happened. So I was having trouble with the reality. Did it happen? Is it happening? Because it was very real to me.
You just knew.
Yes, it was. That's right. It was. It had occurred, but it hadn't. So we're in Maple Leaf Gardens, 18,000 people. And the game was about to start. And by the way, Gary Eman wasn't even on the ice. He wasn't on the starting line. So the lights go down. The building is completely silent. And the referee is about to drop the puck. And I can't hold it back anymore. And I jump up and start yelling and screaming in this building that's quiet in the dark. And 18,000 people turned and looked at me and my dad. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, sit down. And I did. And it wasn't so much of his command that astonished me. It was, I realized nobody knew Eman was going to score.
Wow.
And that had a huge impact on me. I got quiet, which was unusual for me, and I guess probably still is. And I started thinking, anyway, a couple of minutes later, Gary Eman jumps over the boards. A guy named Red Kelly passes the puck to him, and Eman tips the puck in the net for the winning goal. And Maple Leaf Gardens erupted. It went crazy, and all the flash cameras and the yelling and screaming and people cheering, and I just looked around and said, other people think differently, and that was when I knew I was different. That was when I knew, and that was when I knew it had it would have something to do with how I was going to live my life. There was that awareness at 9 and a half, almost 10.
Oh, wow.
Wow, yeah, you were young.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you would go on to work in those cozy tea rooms, and
Yes.
like you said, get yourself up the street.
Yes, I had been living on the street in the wintertime, and I had survived by my intuition, my instincts, my it was a training it was like a boot camp for me, being on the street. And it was more than just staying alive. It was where some of my moral foundations were formed. It was how I honed my psychic ability, and during those days had a huge impact on what direction my life would have gone. Always when I was on the street, if I were in trouble, and children on the street get into trouble, even if they don't cause it. And I always had the option of using my psychic ability, intuition, or a illegal or do an immoral act. And there was no right or wrong. There was no good or bad. It was about surviving. Most of the time, I used my instincts, my intuition, my psychic ability. There were a few times that I didn't. So there, as I said, there wasn't a right or wrong, but the way my life was directed depended upon what decisions I made. And so I'm in the position that I'm in now because of that, building that foundation. I heard that if you worked at a place called the Cosy Tea Room, and by the way, it was a dive, but it was the number one in the city, but it was a dive. And I was a street kid, okay? So I heard that if you worked at the Cosy Tea Room in the afternoon doing readings, at the end of in the shift, you would get a sandwich and a cup of tea and some cookies, and you would get paid after the shift. And if you worked in the evening, you would get a hot dinner, like, oh, wow, that. Tea and cookies, and again, get paid at the end of the shift. So I phoned Mrs. Cox. She was the owner, and I was Bob Milne, and in fact, I might have even been Bob Millen, and I told her that I could do readings, and she said, come in, and I went for an interview. It was January 17th, by the way, and I went in, and you had to do cards and tea leaf readings. And I didn't know how to do. I'd never looked at tea leaves, and we didn't play cards at my place, where in my home. So I didn't know anything about reading tea leaves, and I didn't know anything about reading cards. But you had to do that to get the job. So, but what I did, because I did a reading for Mrs. Cox, that was the test. So all I did was I picked up the teacup in my hand, and I just held it in front of me very much like this, looked in there, and looked over the edge of the teacup and looked at Mrs. Cox. But I pretended I was looking at the the lumps, globs of crap at the bottom of the teacup. But I did. Then it was time to do card reading. So I just put the cards on the table, and I just, I was pretty good at speaking then. So I just told that person's life story, pointing to the cards and saying, this is what this indicates, when I had no idea what the nine of, right? I would just be psychic, but and then point to the cards and say, that's what this means. Because that's what I had to do to, get that. So I applied that day. That day I worked both the day shift and the evening shift. So I got like a sandwich and 2 teas and a hot dinner, and I got 2 pays. And that night, I had a place to sleep, and the next day I had a job to go to. And I worked at the Cosy Tea Room until I was about 21. And in that time period, I would work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sometimes even 7 days a week. And there would be days where I would see 35 or 40 people, and there'd be days I'd see 10. And it was like that till I was around 21.
That's really interesting. So I think a lot of people don't realize this. When they go and get a psychic reading, a lot of the psychic people that they might encounter are really just reading them, and the divination tools or whatever they've got in front of them are purely for aesthetics. I know this is true of tarot in particular, right?
Well, it is for me. Now,
is,
I know. Okay.
Tough. Sorry.
No, not at all.
To know the meaning of every card and that kind of stuff, and a lot of times they're really just kind of reading your energy.
Okay, so I don't want to get into hassles with other people that do this work. I don't use a medium. I've never had to, and I've never really wanted to. I always found a medium was medium would be cards, palm, crystal ball. But you might notice just behind me here there is a crystal ball. Okay. Yeah. So, and I've had that for about 40 years. Never used it other than it sat beside me for 40 years of readings, and it's got all the energy. Oh, I'll tell you. Oh, okay. I'll tell you the story about the first time I looked into the crystal ball at the Cosy Tea Room. So I personally have never used the medium, but I know people that, when you talk about tarot cards, I know people that know everything about every single tarot card, and they might have 27 different decks or 7. And they'll know the meaning of every single card and every variance, and they really have it all together.
Sure. I wasn't saying there wasn't validity to it. I'm just saying I think sometimes people just use them, and it's, they're not really relying on the cards so much as the person's energy.
There are a lot of people that are like that as well. And I always encourage people not to stop using. I wouldn't encourage anyone to stop using what makes them feel most comfortable, but I would always encourage someone to learn how to do readings without that medium. It'll develop your skills even greater to use the medium.
Now, when you say medium for our listeners, what do you mean by that?
Well, cards, palm, crystal ball, bones, tea leaves, coffee leaves.
So it's basically chills.
At the tea room, they used to have this thing you could get called an egg white reading. So they'd be a clear glass of warm water, and they'd put an egg white in it. It looked like somebody barfed in the glass. You paid $5 for that, though.
There you go.
Right? Now, when you go to the tea room for, tea leaf reading and the card reading, it was $2.50. And the tea room got $1.50 and the reader got $1. Oh, that ate my guts out. Oh, it made me crazy. You see, it wasn't about, I recognized very early at the tea room that there were people that were making a living off of people like me. And I realized very early that Mrs. Cox, Mr. Cox, Grace, Mrs. Cox's daughter, and Pearl the waitress, they were making their living because of people like me giving service. And what I also realized very, very early is most of the people that do readings are deeply wounded, often live in poverty or live poorly, have difficult lives, and often have addictions. And at the tea room, I saw people that were good at their ability, good at their craft, but lived very, very poorly. And I saw that, and I had noticed, and I've noticed that throughout my entire career.
Mm-hmm. So good trend.
So at 15 and a half, I realized that my people, it's like I was still, a kid, and I was seeing my people and seeing how poorly we were being treated. And then the tea room was making more. Now they had more overhead, but if they didn't have us, they'd have shit, right? And I always had that attitude. So Mrs. Cox and I, we did have over that 5 or 6 years, we did have our clashes, and I got fired several times, and I quit a bunch of times as well. And just as it got time close to rent day, right? Mrs. Cox would come and say, "Oh yeah, okay, all right, I'll come back to work." So it was like that too. So
yeah. Our friend Robert Riggy says Pearl the waitress. She sounds fascinating.
And he says, "Can you talk?"
Well, her job. Now, back in those days, and I kid you not, it was against the law to do psychic readings, and it was called the Witchcraft Act. This is the truth, I promise. It was repealed
law,
in 2019.
Wow.
It was enacted in about 1895, and it was on the Criminal Code, Section 326 of the Canadian Criminal Code. The Witchcraft Act stated, anyone who fraudulently, tells fortunes for a consideration, does healing using an occult or crafty science, accuse someone of a crime using an occult or crafty science, or claim to find lost people by using an occult or crafty science, is punishable by summary conviction of not more than 1 year in jail and $5,000 fine. So that got repealed in 2019, July 1st.
Wow. All that time.
Yeah. So the tea room was really selling readings. And the way they got around it was selling tea and sandwiches, and the tea leaf and card readings were for entertainment purposes, and there were signs on the wall that said that. That's how. And so now the idea in those days was that people got a tea leaf reading and a card reading, and that was $250. But Pearl's job was to get the person to get more, buy more. So they offered a service like a palm reading, and if you got a palm reading, it was an extra $1, but the reader got 50 cents, and the tea room got 50 cents. Or you could do a tarot reading, or you could do a crystal ball reading, or you can do an egg white reading. Each one's $1. Oh, except for the egg white. Egg white's $5, right?
My goodness.
Or you could have a complete reading, and that is you'd get a reading with everything done, and everything would be split down the middle with the reader. So
it sounds like the lap dance going to the VIP room.
You notice that, eh? Right.
That.
But that wasn't our job. That was Pearl's job or Mrs. Cox's job, or to upsell them, and that's how it happened. So I'd been out there about 2 weeks, and I had this old in the room that and this was a house that Mr. and Mrs. Cox lived in, and the bedrooms. The bedrooms during the day were their kids' bedrooms for the reading rooms, right? And then at night, the kids would sleep in the bedrooms. So,
wow.
So
industrious.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So I'm just trying to think of what I was saying about that.
Pearl, and we were talking about Pearl.
Oh yeah. And so the idea was to upsell people because we would get more. So I had in this room that I was in, it was a card table and card chairs that I sat at, and there was this glass ball. It didn't look. It was all grungy, and anyway, it was over at the corner. And this guy came in for a reading, and he gave me, a shit for crystal reading, and I thought, oh shit, what am I going to do here? I ignored it. The card that said crystal ball reading. I didn't even want to take it. That way I wouldn't have to do the reading. So he insisted. So I looked around, I got the ball, and I put it down in front of me. And I started to look at it, and he started to look at it. And I'd never looked in a crystal ball before. And we'd kind of look back and forth. And then I went, oh my God, I see something there. Oh, and it was just, and I was absolutely astonished that I saw something. And what it was an outline of a map. And it turned out to be a map of the guy's country. He was from Africa. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anything. It really kind of, blew me away. Blew him away too. It was really cool.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then there was another time where I was doing a reading for, and the furniture was like absolutely crap. You had to be careful or you'd fall off the chairs. So I was doing a reading for this lady, and when I was doing her cards, and I pointed to some cards, and I said, now it's very important. You got to watch your balance, because I see a fall happening. And like 3 minutes later, her chair crashed. She fell off her chair.
Wow.
Yeah. So then there was this. Now remember, I'm like 15, 16 years old. There was this lady, this old lady, and she and they all came to test me, right? Like I was like the fresh meat that joined. I was also sober because I was like 15 or 16. So anyway, this woman I was doing a reading for my normal way, and she looked like my great grandmother. She was so old, and now I was really being psychic. I wasn't faking that. I was just playing with the cards, because that's what I had to do it to make my living. And I was, as I was putting the cards down, I was sensing her becoming more social and meeting a man, but not like a love affair. Now remember, I'm a kid, so like not like a love affair or anything, but a gentleman that would be kind, or just they'd be old people together. So I said to her, I see a gentleman coming into your life, and she slammed her fist down on the table and said, it's not going to do him any good now, so.
That's awesome.
And then there was the star of the tea room in those days. His name was Red Hawk, and Red Hawk was part indigenous, and nobody else knew the other part. But this guy was the star of that era, and we'd get to work in tea room would open at 11:30. We'd start doing readings at noon. We'd get there at 11:15. Or 11:45, and the whole tea room would be full, and everybody's waiting for Red Hawk. And by the time he got there, he was booked for the whole day. He also had, he was missing part of his leg, and he also used to drink a lot. And but he was always really good and very generous with me, and he was always getting the private parties, and on Sundays he'd take me with him. But on a slow day, sometimes at the tea room, if he didn't have any whiskey with him, he'd get up and hobble down the stairs, get into a cab, go to the liquor store, and come back with a bottle of whiskey. So Mrs. Cox didn't like that. So sometimes Red Hawk would have a snooze, and he would take his leg off, and Mrs. Cox would hide it. And so he wouldn't leave the tea room and then get drunk and not come back. So anyway, now the whole tea room, it's all full, or there's people there. Anyway, then it starts to get full, and Red Hawk has been sleeping for a little while. He wakes up, and he can't find his leg. So he hops down the hallway, and he gets to the banister, right in front of my room, by the way, and he's leaning over the banister yelling, Pearl! Pearl, bring my goddamn leg up here. So that was often like it was kind of fun. There was those things that went on there.
Oh, that's awesome. And I have to imagine, I think I've used this analogy before. It reminds me a little bit like the Beatles going to Hamburg, Germany, and playing like these incredibly long sets because,
Absolutely.
I was a musician in another lifetime, and I remember I was doing some work in bands, and when those bands started to work more, you start to get better at your craft, right?
Absolutely.
And like the Beatles were playing all day, like 7 days a week, and all this stuff. Of course, it became like the back of the hand, right?
That's correct. And another example of that is the original Oscar Peterson trio. Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, Herb Ellis. Herb Ellis played guitar, Ray Brown played bass, and Oscar Peterson was the piano player. Ray Brown and Herb Ellis roomed together, and every day they played. Ray Brown would play his bass, and Herb Ellis would practice the guitar all day long. They'd go out and play tennis, come back, rehearse or practice all day. They'd go to their gig, do their gig, and then they would go to other after hour clubs, and they would jam with other musicians. And that's what they did all the time. And that's why they were great. And that's why the Beatles were great, because they did it and did it and did it and did it and did it.
Sure.
It was a lifestyle. And that repetition is just,
That's right.
There's no better way to get better than to practice, right?
Absolutely. Well, actually, it's better to do it than to practice.
Hands-on.
Well, that's kind of what I mean.
Well, okay. Yeah.
They're actually out doing it.
Because I practiced, I when I was around 21, I made a vow that, because I had heard when a young man becomes ordained as a priest in the Catholic Church, he makes a vow that he'll say a mass every day of his life. So I decided that I was going to make that kind of commitment, and my vow was I would do at least one psychic reading or practice doing psychic readings every day of my life. And I did that without missing a day for about 30 years. So now I still practice even after all these years. And if somebody happens to call and I answer the phone and it's my day off and I have my opportunity to practice or to do the reading, I'll do the reading. And often do it for free just because the person's there and is practicing is better. So I'll do it that way too still.
That's great. That's really great. Now, speaking of that, I'm going to lead you into this. You said that you were researching. What are you researching and you're learning lately?
Well, over the past couple of years, I've been on, I'm not sure I chose it or I fell into it. I've been on a more spiritual
path.
Yeah. And that certainly has opened my mind to many different things. But I also now, after appearing on I think 40 podcasts last year as a guest, I now have my own podcast. And one of the things that I've been discovering, so now I've always worked on my own. After I left the tea room, I never worked with anybody else. I never liked the competition because it was always, they were always shooting at me. So I didn't like that. So I just made my way in the world, doing my work my way. And I haven't been around that many people. So but I always thought of myself as someone in my way of thinking would be, if you think like 1 inch deep and 5 miles square. I always thought of myself as that kind of thinker. And a few years ago, I realized, and especially since I started being on podcasts, I realized that actually I'm an expert in this field, and I'm more like 1 inch square and 5 miles deep. And I decided that I wanted to be broader. So I started doing doing podcasts, having my own podcast, and talking to people about how they're doing their work. And it has been absolutely fascinating, just incredible. It's been
That's
so much
what
fun.
we feel as well. The experiences from your point of view,
Sure.
the guest point of
Get to
view.
hear from so many different people.
Yes.
And your
Yes.
podcast is called My Side of the Crystal Ball.
My Side of the Crystal Ball. Yeah,
Yeah.
I came up with that name too.
I like
Yeah,
I like that.
we love it.
Well, what I'm doing, and I'm kind of using slang. What I'm doing is really saying this is how I see what being psychic is, and this is how I see the world as a psychic. That's how it happens.
That's great. That's wonderful.
That's really what I was saying from my side of the crystal ball.
Great.
But I also have said over my lifetime is, I spent 8 hours today slaving over a hot crystal ball. I used to say that a lot. still do, yeah.
So how did that come together? And
How did I end up doing a podcast?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Now, when did you launched it fairly recently, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It was, I think August 8th.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's every 2 weeks. So it wasn't August 8th. It was later. This coming Wednesday, the 5th podcast is being launched. The way it happened, I've spent most of my career in mainstream media, and the bulk of my career was done before there was an internet. And when I did a show, I would pack up, have my secretary, and we would fly to a city, check in to the day before the radio show or the TV show, then go on the show, and then tell people I'm in town, and then book 25, 30, 50, 100 readings, and then go to the next city. But usually one show 1 week. And there were years where I was on the road like 40 weeks, and not a complaint. It was wonderful, but I traveled like that, and it was fun. And I was the first Canadian psychic to do that on the air. I was the first one to be traveling around the world, and I was a little bit ahead of everybody. I was lucky. Anyway, doing readings on a show is boring to the audience. And what talk show hosts learned early in the days, that when they had a psychic on, the lines would be jammed. So a psychic on the air doing readings, good or bad, whether they will draw a lot of callers, but they don't necessarily draw listeners. And because nobody really gives a shit whether somebody else is gonna move or not, or get a new house or better job. Like who cares about that person? So but these are important things for everyone else, but not for the listening audience. Mm-hmm. So but talk show hosts learned that when they got a psychic on, they wouldn't have to work because there'd be lots of calls. And then what would happen is a lot of people that said they were psychic or had done 200, 300, 100 readings in their life, they'd get on the air, never been on the air before, and would sound really boring. And what they would do is that they would play to the caller. And I learned very quickly that I've got one person on the line and there is 5,000 people listening. And I played to the listener. So I would do things in the reading. Like, for example, even now, if I do a show now, and I will be in a little while, but when I was taking calls, here's the ways to do it. People would call up, and I'd say, tell me your first name, and where you're calling from. Your first name, where you're calling from, and have a question ready, but don't ask it. So, somebody phone up, hi, my name is Joe. I'm calling from the south end of Boston. Hey, Joe, thanks a lot. Bam. And I would just start talking. and I would and I would do things and play to the audience. So yeah, Joe wants to know if he's going to get his teeth fixed, but the audience doesn't care about that. But if I say to Joe, now also remember, in those days, telephones were attached to the wall, and okay, so I would somebody would call up, it would be Joe, and I'd say, okay, so Joe, you're sitting at the kitchen table right now. Is that correct? You'd say, yeah. And I'd say, okay, you're holding the phone with your left hand. Yeah. Okay, so Joe, put your hand over the table, move it to the right. Put your hand right. Is that where it got burned? And Joe goes, yeah, wow, right? And I would do that, and then I'd say, by the way, next week you'll be getting that molar fixed. And then I'd go to the next call. And I was doing that. Now, I recently was on, about a year ago, and I'm going to be on that show again, with Tim
Weisberg.
Thank you. I did open line with him, and on the last show that I did, and I've got a recording of this too, because old Robert's still got that. Anyway, this guy phones up. I don't know where he's from. I can't remember. It was a southern state. Anyway, we're talking, and now it's a little difficult to find where people are because the cell phone can take you anywhere. Whereas the regular phone, you were restricted. So where you could move. So I could focus in on those there. So anyway, I asked the guy, did he live in a house or a smaller type like apartment building? And he said like a small apartment building. And I said, okay. This is after, hi, my name is George from whatever. I can't quite remember this name. So anyway, I say to the guy, if you were standing in front of your apartment building, you're facing it now. On the left side of the building, halfway down, up near the roof, it looks like there's been some water damage or something like that. And there was like silence. And the guy said, that happened last week, and the roof caved in from the water damage. And he was going, how did you know that? And, I said, no, because I'm psychic. So, and this guy, after we talked for another couple of minutes, he kept going back to, how did you do that? How did you, and that's what he was saying when we were hanging up on him. And so that was the kind of stuff that I was doing.
I bet you a lot of people had asked you that. How do you know?
How do you know? And how do you know? So
yes,
let's talk a little bit about that. We were talking earlier today, Robert, about some of the origins of psychic ability and theories about where this comes from. Can you?
Yep, I can. Well, okay, so being psychic is a natural skill that just about every mammal has, not just human, but just about every mammal. And it's an instinct. It comes from inside, and it has absolutely nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with spirituality. It has nothing to do with anything other than surviving. And that instinct that we have, that we call psychic, is one of the reasons we made it out of the caves. Everybody has that intuition, so being psychic. So if you look at the word psychic, psychic comes from the Greek root psyche, which means mind, soul, or self. If you have a mind or soul or a self and you use one of them, you're a psychic. So that is what it takes to be a psychic. Now, can anybody be? Probably not. But if you take every human on the planet and you line them up and you make a bell-shaped curve, there is one person at this far end that has absolutely zero psychic ability or instinct, or absolutely none. And then at the other end of the bell-shaped curve, there's another person that is like a walking a sponge, sensing all that, like 100%. And then the rest of us are in between. So just about everybody can be. Have you ever been somewhere and you just sort of casually look over and you see someone's been looking at you? Not necessarily like they're stalking you. They just happen to be looking at you and you make eye contact.
Sure.
Or you were thinking about somebody that you hadn't talked about for a while. Ring, ring. Then they're on the phone, or you get a text, or that is what just about everybody can do. Well, that is what's called our intuition and being psychic. It's there. When you pay attention to it, it gets easier to identify what's happening. It has nothing to do with our intelligence. It has nothing to do with being spiritual. It is a raw talent that virtually all mammals have, and especially us humans. Now, in order, when I teach a seminar, I'm going to start again, but I taught this seminar. It was one day, and I would take a group of people, and the largest group was like over 300, and the smallest was 10, and everywhere in between. And I guaranteed to everyone that would sit in that class, I guaranteed that they would be doing psychic reading. They would sit in front of a stranger and do psychic readings that day, or I'll give you back your money. That's it. Okay, no question. They are or they're not. They get their money, or I get to keep the money. And that was where it was. In all the years I did it, I gave back money twice. So what I would start off with doing is asking people to start identifying all the words that represented being psychic. So you look at all the words, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient.
All the clairs.
And you go through the clairs. I did. So you go through the clairs. I'm sorry.
The tea room was hopping.
I got that before you did. So that. And then there's intuitives. Then there's and it just goes on and on and on and on. And when you spend all this time identifying, oh well, I'm a clairsentient, but actually. But my friend is a telepath, or and when you start trying to identify it, all you end up doing is thinking about it, and you don't do it. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I would eliminate all those words, and I would just say feel, and then I would say look at the person in front of you. Look at them. Just look at them. And look at what's obvious about them. Just see that. So I've gone a little bit farther into the story. So years ago, I used to like to paint. Not pictures. I used to like to paint houses and the insides of houses because I'm not very handy, but I could paint. And I lived in one house for 5 years, and I painted it from top to bottom 5 different times. And I used to paint my friends' houses. I used to volunteer because I just love painting. I also have a friend that was a building contractor. And one day he came to visit me in my new home where I'd done this beautiful paint job, and everyone was saying, wow, this is a great paint job. Hugh O'Malley walks in, looks around and says, who did your paint job? It's terrible. And I said, well, I did, Hugh. And he said, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad. and I said, okay. And I looked, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. So I said to him, why does it look bad? And he pointed to me the mistakes I made, the messes. And to him, it was obvious. And when he showed that to me, it was obvious, and I could never unsee it. And every time I would go into a place that had been painting, I would see it, and it would become obvious.
And then as I became aware of what was obvious, then more became obvious again.
So you're paying attention to it. Yeah, just kept
so
right.
That's right. So you look at that person and you start off with talking about what's obvious about them. When you see what's obvious, more about them becomes obvious. And then more becomes obvious again. Mm-hmm. And it continues to grow like that, exponentially that way. But there then comes a point that in your awareness of seeing the obvious, what is obvious to you is not obvious to others.
Right.
Now, an example of that was when I was doing phone-in shows. There would be times where and all I had was their first name and where they're calling from. And you know, being a psychic for 50 plus years, I know some of the tricks of the trade, and some of the tricks of the trade is having filler in what you're saying, because you can't always be like getting everything clearly, and sometimes you know you have to keep that energy flowing, and there are things that you can say, and there are things that you can say that you're almost never wrong, and that just keeps the energy flowing. It's not faking it; it's just keeping the energy flowing while you're building your ideas, and so on the air, I was taking these calls. I knew the person's name, where they were calling from, and I also used to study all the shows that I did. And when I kept my recordings of people's readings, which was about 15 years ago, every month I pick a couple of readings that I've done, and I watch them to see how I'm performing with them, and making sure that I'm not falling into routines and boring fillers, and making sure that I'm being fresh. So anyway, I'll be doing some crazy thing, move your hand, or if you look above that window there, is that where it just got cracked, or stuff like that. There'll be times where, and I'm in that mode, I'll say, Robert, come on, man. Anyone could know that. It's so bloody obvious. And I say, Robert, you gotta be careful, man. You're gonna get caught pulling this stuff. So that's what I'm saying when I'm on the air doing it. Okay. So when I do one of those and I say, you gotta, come on, man, this is bullshit. You're in trouble. You're gonna get caught. I make a point of watching the show, and I can remember what I'm thinking when I'm saying that. And when I'm just listening, I'm not in that state. And I realized during that one particular call, there is nothing about that call that was obvious, just absolutely nothing. But when I was in the moment, it was.
Sure. And in your back of your mind, you're thinking these things, but when you play it back, it just kind of goes kind of smoothly, right?
Absolutely. And
this is great information. Because you have people like Colette McCardle out here, since I'm a spiritualist medium in the UK, and have always been like this since I was a child. Started doing readings for the past 10 years, and goes on to say she went to a church, and so we've got actual mediums and stuff out there listening to you right now. So this is great.
Now, when I said you don't have to be spiritual to be psychic, you don't, because it's a natural phenomenon. Now, people that are spiritual, people that lean towards that, often have these skills as well and use them. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to have that spirit. You don't have to be spiritual. Now, on the other hand, people that say they're spiritual, New Agers, I'm really spiritual. The implication is I'm spiritual, meaning, I'm evolving. Okay. Well, just hold your horses, cowboy. There's good spiritual, and then there's bad spiritual, or evil spiritual. There was this guy, Anton LaVey. And he wrote the book, The Satanic Bible.
Sure.
He also had the Satanic Church of California. Mm-hmm. And he was spiritual, but he was evil.
as
right.
house.
So there's different
but
types
he's
of
spiritual. Absolutely. So when someone says they're spiritual, just understand that doesn't mean that they're evolved or better. They can be on any level, and we are spiritual. So you don't have to be like that to be able to do readings. Like dogs aren't okay. Beings don't have to be spiritual to be instinctive.
Sure.
I stopped when I said dogs because
I know,
I'm a
because we
dog
know
person,
you have
right? That's
lots
right.
of dogs.
So,
Right.
3, yeah.
To Anton I don't know if I would necessarily characterize him as evil, as being sort of selfish. I read that book in high school, like a lot of high schoolers, and it's just a very
Egotistical,
more self-fulfillment.
A lot of the things that they would have done, though, in their rituals in the church would certainly be calling down some negative energies. Now, I don't know very much about that. I really do my best to stay away from all that kind of stuff. But my sense is that they would, in the church, they would have done some negative issues.
Yeah. Now, do you deal with spirits at all? As far as through psychic ability, like we talked to a lot of people that are psychic mediums.
So I just want to address Colette. Colette, this isn't about you personally.
I was going to say that.
It's got nothing to do with you spiritually. I was just talking about my opinion about something. So not
right.
Okay. So
about defining the word spiritual. That's
right.
all.
That's all.
Yeah.
I'm not passing judgment on anybody. I'm talking about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, people can do psychic stuff because it's in your mind, and it's spiritual. For a long time, sorry, it's psychic. It's what we have as ourselves. Now, for a long time in my life, I actually said I didn't believe in God. And I believed that everything I said I did, everything that came through me was me. It was me, my skills, my commitment, my hard work. It was how I caused myself to grow and evolve. My commitment. There was one time when I was west. And when I'm doing a reading for somebody, and I've been in that energy for so long, I know when I'm saying something and it's right, and I know what the energy feels like, and I know what it's like when I'm wrong. And the way that I know what it's like when I'm wrong is because I've been wrong, and I compare the two, and there is a difference. Sometimes when you're so there is a difference between what it feels like when you're right and what you feel like when you're wrong. Sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes it's like a sledgehammer. After doing a couple thousand readings, you'll start to sense what that's like. Especially dealing with the ones where you get the negative feedback. So I'm just trying to remember where I was going with this about. Help me! I just got lost.
Help me, Jesus. No, we were talking about
spirits.
Okay, yeah, but I thought I passed that. So I forgot what I was going to say. Oh well.
No worries.
You might come back.
Well,
it was about being doing things.
Things like going into the light and things like
that.
Oh,
I know what it was. I know what it was. My denying or saying there wasn't a God and it was all an accident.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I sometimes remember when I'm doing a reading, I know when it's right. And I was doing a reading for this man. He had been my client for about 25 years, and his mother-in-law, grandma, introduced him to me for reading, because I did readings for grandma as well years before that. And I knew the family well. So he had come to me for a reading, and he was talking about the beautiful house that they were building, and they were making this special place for Grandma to come and move. And by the way, the reason I called her Grandma is because that's what people called her, and that's what she said I should call her. She said, "Call me Grandma." So anyway, Grandma was in her own place and doing very, very well. Thank you very much. And then she just started giving her stuff away. And my client and his wife were talking with Graham about how wonderful it's going to be that, she'll be in the house with them. And in the middle of this guy's reading, or when he was telling me about it, I said to him, Paul, Grandma doesn't want to move. And Grandma doesn't want to come into that apartment. And Grandma probably isn't going to. And what Grandma's doing now is she's getting ready to complete her life. And I said it even softer than I just did now. And in that moment, I believed absolutely that what I had said and what I had done was the absolute right thing to do. I believed it. And it was really strong. So after my day's work, anyway, the next day, that I fell asleep that night. And in the middle of the night, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I went from a deep sleep to wide awake to, how bloody dare you say such things to that man and tell him those things about Grandma? How dare you do that? What the hell is the matter with you? Oh, I was just sick that I had given that information, that that it was wrong. And I was talking to my friend in Calgary the next day, and I was telling him about the reading and then waking up in the middle of the night. And he said to me, Robert, I've never really wanted to talk with you about this, but I've always suspected that you're channeling. And now, with what happened last night and today, he said, I absolutely believe that you're channeling. And I then sort of opened my mind to it. But I wasn't, and I've never been concerned about what medium or form that I'm doing. I don't care if it's some being telling me something, if I'm seeing something, feeling something. My job is to help that person in front of me the way I can. And whatever you want to call it, this is what I do. I don't get hung up on words.
And labels. Yeah.
I'm an action kind of guy. So I can, it's like I'm really not great at world predictions because, I don't understand world predictions. I can't, solve world hunger, or I can't create world peace. I can feed the hungry person right in front of me. That's what I can do. Right. And I can make the person in front of me safe. And that's been my life commitment.
That's a fantastic analogy.
It is.
What you're basically saying is like the message comes to you, and whether it comes to you from like a spirit or whether you're just getting it from this person's, quote unquote energy, or just the natural ability. It doesn't matter. The message is still getting across.
Well, that's right. I can put a turban on and put on a long coat and or a cape and well, actually I did when I was a kid. I used to wear a long black cape and a big scarf and a big leather hat. I used to do all that stuff, and I also used to wear really fancy custom made suits and stuff as well. So I've been through them all. But it's always been help the person in front of me. And it didn't matter how I did it, it was doing it. And it didn't matter what it was called. And that's how I've done it. So the reason as time wore on why I said I didn't believe in God, and that when so not only is my psychic ability used in terms of giving readings, there's a radar around me that when anyone's in trouble, I see it and react to it. And I've saved more people's lives, like literally, not like, oh, I saved your life, sort of. I mean, literally from getting run over by a train or things like that. I can't remember how many times.
Wow.
It's beyond my, because I see the problem or the crises, I react to it, and then just go on with my life. So what I've always been focused on is that being in front of me. So here's an example. Am I taking over the show? Would you rather?
No.
Oh, okay. So here was a time, an example of how my awareness is and how it's part of my life. So I had an office in downtown, in Midtown Toronto. My dentist was in downtown Toronto, and I was going to the dentist. So I had a specific way I'd go on subway. On this day, I don't know why, I just went a different way, and it was the long way. And I went from one subway line, and I got on the next, or I was waiting to get on the next, and the platforms was shared with the northbound and southbound train. As I was coming down the stairs to get on the southbound train, the train came in, and I ran down the stairs a bit. And as I was getting up to the train, it was getting ready to leave, and the doors were closing. And I just stepped back out of the way as the doors were closing, and this woman came rushing up beside me, trying to get on the subway car. And the doors closed, and she got her foot caught in the door, and the train was starting to move. And she was right in front of me. I just simply reached down, put my hands around her ankle, and I pulled her foot out of her shoe. And then just pulled her back a bit. And then I let go and stepped back, and her shoe started bouncing between the platform and the train cars. And it was bouncing, and then there was a space between the train, the cars, and the shoe was going down into the track.
Wow.
This woman started to reach down to get her shoe that was bouncing and started to fall in. And I reached around, put my arms around her waist, held her, and I just took 3 steps back and let go of her. And at the same time, that train left, and then I heard a train coming on the other side. And I realized that the train that I had pulled this woman away from was actually the northbound train, and the southbound train was the one coming in, and that was the one for me. And I just walked over. And I didn't even say anything to her. I just went over and got on my train. And I was sitting there, as the train going to the next stop, and I thought, you just saved that woman's life.
Twice.
Yeah. And I thought, that's interesting. And then I got off the train and went upstairs and got my teeth drilled. And, so I can't tell you how many times things like that happen. So my focus is the person in front of me. Now, in order to do something like that, if I believed in God, a long time ago, that would be a prophet.
It would be some kind of a miracle, basically. Yes.
Right. I would be. Okay. Right. I would be. Now, I love the title. Like, oh, fuck, what do you do for your living? Oh, I'm a prophet, man. Like, wow, great title. But, oh, hey, I am not worthy of such a title. I am not. And if I had a title like that, or if I were doing those things, I would be doing God's work. Oh no.
Right.
I'm not worthy to do that. I just don't. I'm just not worthy of that. And for that reason, I renounced God. That was the reason.
Wow. That's
insightful. So when we talk about these things like spirits and different things or an afterlife, do you kind of shun it for that reason? Like you almost don't.
I don't shun it. I don't. Okay, so we're talking about
I've been
Maybe
we've been talking different pieces of my 50+ year career.
Sure.
I don't shun it. I don't deny it. It's not important. What's important is getting the job done, helping the person. So that's what's the important thing. And I have a lot of arrows in my quiver, many. And I use whatever one I need in whatever way.
Do you sense a thing of like when people talk about crossing into the light and that kind of stuff? And that is something we hear a lot. So I'm just wondering, does that mean anything to you, or just like that's not part of my gig? I'm really just about getting the communications there. I don't see that.
Now, the last few years, I've become more broad-minded, more open-minded to other things. So never denying, it's just not important. So it's like, I'm not interested in UFOs because it really doesn't make a difference in how good I'm going to be helping someone who's drowning. Okay, or someone who's thinking of committing suicide. It doesn't matter if I believe in UFOs or ghosts or the devil. It doesn't matter. What matters is helping that person.
Fantastic.
Okay, that's what it's about.
Now, do you know who's you're channeling? Is it an earthbound spirit? Do you know, like, a spirit guide? Do you call him that? And
I don't have a personal relationship that would be called a spiritual guide.
Okay.
I don't. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this guy right in front of me, right?
But how we were just trying to elaborate on how and where you get the information from. Like, I'm clairaudient, and sometimes I get it in my ear, and then I also feel things, see, things, and
I use a variety of techniques, and not just one. Now, Maharishi, who Meshi Yogi, he's the guy that introduced transcendental meditation to North America and the Beatles, and he says, speak to the man. All right, now speak to the person in the language they understand. So if somebody needs to hear spirits, then I will make reference to that, but still keep honest with myself and give them the information I always do. If somebody doesn't care, then I just give them the information. My interest is giving them the information.
Right.
Not how I do it. And right. if I have to swear a whole lot in a reading, I will. If I have to speak like a scholar in a reading, I will. I will present the information to that person in the way they can receive it.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
It does.
Makes total sense.
Robert Reagan.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Robert, are you a practitioner of past life regression?
I've done kind of stuff like that. It's been interesting, but once again, my work is helping the person get through their life crises right now. And there may be times I will make reference to why they're in this position, or, here's the reason why you've got this problem with your neck, or you don't like being touched here. This may have been one of the reasons. And I'll use that, and it's real. I'm being psychic. However, my focus is, keeping them alive today. That's and also letting them know there is a tomorrow. Now, when I do readings, so
I slowed down about 7 years ago. I stopped doing shows because I just started hating it. And I just stopped. I just didn't like that I wasn't being respected for the skill I have. And I was one of those, which that really pissed me off. One of those. So I stopped. And then I slowed down and, to doing about 400 or 500 readings a year. And I was really comfortable. That was like my semi-retired being the old-fashioned old psychic. So, I'd see, a few people every day. And most years between 400 and 500. And that was cool. And then the book, Perfect Predator came out. And it was where the guy caught a superbug, and it was the most potent superbug on the planet. And when you got, in those days, at that time, when you got that superbug, it meant you died. It was 100% antibiotic resistant. He was my client, by the way, and his wife also was my client. And my client, and Tom's wife, the guy that got the superbug, Stephanie, is a world famous epidemiologist. Oh. And when her husband was in the coma dying from the superbug, I told her that she could find the cure. And I worked with her. Now, I wasn't the star and I wasn't the one that absolutely found the cure, but my work kept Tom alive long enough that when the cure was found, and I helped Stephanie find the cure. Tom was the first person ever to be treated with this specific treatment and live. And he was the first one. He was in a coma for 8 months. Anyway.
That's absolutely amazing. And did she put your name in the?
Oh, I mentioned in the book. Now the publisher. Now this wasn't even this wasn't any self-published book. This was published by one of the main publishers in the world. And by the way, Stephanie's husband is also a professor, but he's a professor of experimental psychology and a professor of psychiatry at Southern California. And Stephanie is. Professor of epidemiology at the same university, associate dean of epidemiology, and they're world famous researchers. And there were many people on board around the world. Some of the greatest minds on the planet collaborated to group together. And made this miracle happen, changed the way medicine was treated or done. My role was I had a mental link with Tom 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I knew what was going on with him when he was in the coma. I knew when he was feeling okay. I knew when he was in trouble. I knew when he was sick. I knew when he was dying. I knew what he needed. And on 3 different occasions, had I not been doing my job, he would have died. So I helped Stephanie.
Story.
Yeah, and so when the book was published, the publisher decided that they didn't want to put very much of the psychic stuff in the book. And they just wanted to focus on the scientific. But I was mentioned 26 or 27 times in the book.
Oh, that's
and on a couple of different occasions, Stephanie and I and Tom have gone on shows and they've talked about what I did. Here's an example of that. The way I knew that Tom would be in trouble, or the way I would send it. By the way, he was first in Egypt and then in Germany, then in California. I was in Toronto. So the way that I would know what his life force was like, I just visualized a candle. If the flame was strong, I knew his life force. I knew he was okay. He was treading water. If the candle flickered, I knew that there was a problem. And I knew when his vital signs changed. I knew when stuff was going on. And it got to the point where I was a couple of days ahead of the doctors as when they were diagnosing what was going on. And after a while, when I was a couple of days ahead of the doctors, I would use colloquialisms. I couldn't use medical terms. I would use a colloquialism to describe something. And when the doctors would be explaining it to Stephanie, they would often use the very same colloquialism that I had used like 2 days before. Wow. So there was this one time where Tom was in Germany. He'd been medevac from Egypt. He was in isolation. Everybody's wearing hazmat suits, and like this guy is, and everybody believed he was dying. And Tom was in a coma, but I knew he could hear, and I knew he knew what was going on. And this one day, the candles started flickering, and it was really flickering. And Tom was cold, and he was alone, and he was afraid, and he was letting go. He was letting go of his life force. And I knew that Tom needed to see his children who were in California. I knew that. So when I had my meeting with Stephanie, like 10 minutes later, I said that, Stephanie, Tom needs to see his daughters. Yesterday would have been a really good day. Today's a good day. Tomorrow's not so good. If you wait any more than tomorrow, don't bother. That night, I'm sorry, I get really emotional. That night, the girls arrived, and Tom's vital signs started coming back, and he writes about it in the book, what he was going through at that time. And had the psychic not been there, Tom would have died, and there would have been no book and nothing like that. So that was my, I got that. My number came up. That was my call. It was my turn. There are a lot of people that could have done what I did. There are others that could. It was just my turn to get a big one like that.
What do you know? What's the name of the book for our listeners?
The Perfect Predator.
The Perfect Predator. Okay,
and that's about Stephanie Strathdy.
How do you spell her last name?
Strathh.
Okay.
That's Strathdy. Yeah. And so now that was a job that I did I lived it for about 9 months, and it had a huge effect on me physically, on my health, and it took more than a year to recover from it. Yeah. And while I was doing that, I was still doing my readings and stuff like that.
That must have been hard for you to go through that and try to do readings as well for others.
It was. It actually was. I was gratefully distracted. Because if I wasn't focusing it on something else, I always had Tom's energy there. Mm-hmm. So I had made a psychic mental link with Tom. So and incidentally, that book came out. It was a bestseller, and they're making the movie out of it too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I told Stephanie all about that, when I told her that Tom would live and that there was going to be a book that she'd write and there'd be a movie. I did all that. I came up with that, shallow stuff.
Really?
You've certainly shown us that, you have the ability, you have the experience to do readings, and you do give readings to people, right? If they
I do.
Reach out to you, they would reach out to, would it be the RobertLindseyMilne.com?
Sure, that's a good one.
You can find me on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. And my website, Are we done already?
No, we're not done.
Oh, okay.
We have some questions for you, but I just wanted people who have been listening that say, well, I really want a reading, and maybe they're too afraid to speak out in chat.
Yeah.
To know how to reach you. And it's Robert Lindsey, and it's Lindsy, Milne, MILNE.com is a good way to reach you. And obviously the same name on Facebook and other social medias.
Right.
But I just want them to know because these are some really compelling and interesting stories. And you do have a few comments out there. And we have a Hearts Love Joe is asking, how does Jackson feel toward me currently? And will I hear back from him soon? I feel like he likes me, but he's fighting for his feelings.
Who am I? Who is this?
This is Hearts Love Joe. This is on our YouTube.
All right. Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm speaking to a man or a woman or who it is. Thank you for asking the question. I don't do readings like that now for a lot of reasons. And if you want to ask about something psychic or things like that, I'll be happy to do that. But I don't really do readings like if I do a show doing readings, we're going to have a direct connection, and rather than somebody reading something to me and I try to find you somewhere in the universe.
That's true.
Not a problem. I wasn't.
So, but thank you for asking, and I'm not being heavy or anything. I just.
Oh, that's.
And then there's another one. I know it's just can't you tell me if the person I love or loves me, will they come back? Is that so easy? That's yes or no. And I don't want to take my 50-year career and put it on the line to give somebody information that's typed into your studio and you've read the information to me and I choose. I don't like taking that kind of risk. I don't have to create.
That's fine.
I see it as taking a risk. That's how it now.
That's okay. We got a question from our friend Robert Honings. He has.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, guys. Let's try this again because he's asked this before.
Mm.
Robert, do you believe as a civilization we are going through an awakening of human consciousness into higher frequencies, vibrations, and spiritual realms, and ascension of awareness and perceptions?
Absolutely. Purpose of being on this planet is exactly what Robert, right? You said
yes.
Is exactly the reason that we're on this planet. However, in order to be one thing, you must be equally the opposite. So you cannot just be positive spiritually. You cannot be that. You have to be both sides, positive and negative. We don't eliminate. Excuse me for a second. Hey,
here.
What are you doing?
He's got 3 dogs.
Right. Yeah, it was one of my Goldens. So this is how you get your food. You got to be quiet. So anyway, so we don't eliminate negative. We stay balanced.
Exactly what Andrew just said.
Just wrote that in chat. Balance.
So as you expand, you don't eliminate negative. You stay balanced because balance is the key to power. So what we are one way. So if somebody's a saint, then the other side of them is a demon too, because they are. You cannot be anything else but the opposite. And what you are one way. And usually when beings evolve, they know that. And that's why the Dalai Lama saying, be calm, or be kind, and doing all those things, being positive, that keeps us balanced. But we all are capable of doing. There was this one episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation,
I used to like the first one and especially the next. My dream job in life would have been to have been a ship's counselor on a starship. The captain's.
Rick just had his chance, right?
Yeah, right. I would have loved to have been the ship's counselor. And the fantasy is I'd love to meet a real Betazoid and get psychic lessons from them. So there was this one episode where the Enterprise came upon this uninhabitable planet, but right in the middle of the planet was a green patch and a house and a garden, and inside there were humans there, and they kept trying to get down on the planet, and they kept getting repelled. And finally they broke through and got on the planet, and they looked in this house, and there was this man and this woman dancing a waltz. And finally, they intruded upon this guy, and because they'd been, every time they tried to get near the planet, they would get knocked away by this powerful force, but they got there. So it finally, after a lot of pressure, they realized there was something wrong here, not quite right, and they got the guy aside, and the man was very calm, and he said to Captain Picard, he said, Captain Picard, what I appear to be, I am not. I am an old space traveler. My people are travelers, and we're an ancient peoples, and we're far beyond anything that you ever could imagine. And he said, I had found this beautiful human, and I never felt love before like this. And we came here, and I created this paradise. And there were these creatures that came and invaded our planet, and they were vile creatures. They killed the woman. And he said, in my rage, I killed them all.
Wow.
And then Picard said, while you were in battle, and he said, no, Captain, you don't understand. I killed every one of them in the universe.
Oh, wow.
I wiped out the entire race of people in my anger. And then he looked at Picard and said, you're free to charge me with any crime, I'll submit. And Picard looked at him and said, in our world, we have no such crime. You'll have to work it out yourself. So there was this highly evolved, beautiful being, and in that moment of rage took that power and wiped out an entire race. So but yet he was high and very powerful and very, highly evolved. So
right. It sounds a bit like Jung's shadow work, right? It's kind of like Carl Jung's shadow work.
Is it? Well,
shadow self.
Okay.
And,
of course.
Everybody has this kind of good
we
side.
All do.
Side.
We all do.
We don't always want to face that bad side or characterize ourselves as having that potential.
Right.
And when we deny it, then we're capable of doing it.
True. Yes.
So being positive is great. Just remember, though, what you are one way, you are equally the opposite. Now, I was a street kid. I grew up in an alleyway, so I've done things, and I have programming that saved me, and I did things that were angry, and I was an angry person for a long time. I'm not particularly proud, but if I wasn't that, I wouldn't be who I am now either.
Exactly. That's so true.
Sure.
Yeah.
And Robert Honing says back to you on this. Agreed, Robert. Well said, and thank you. This process is not all positive. Love, light, rainbows, and unicorns. We must also embrace the darkness and expose it to the light. Good and evil, positive and negative, are just varying degrees of the same concept.
That's
the balance
exactly
of
right.
energies is within, is what's vital.
Right. That's right. And the only person that you really should be deciding on how they're living their life is the guy you see in the mirror.
Yep.
Everybody else is doing their own path. So I believe in miracles, by the way. Now I believe that a miracle is only a miracle until you know how to do it. And then when you know how to do it, it's not a miracle. It's something else, but it's not a miracle.
That's very true.
So when I was at the tea room, and then also I lived at a flea bag hotel. It was called Larry's Hideaway Hotel in Toronto. It started off as a strip club, and then it became
top notch.
Oh yeah, right. Of course. Oh yes.
It started off as a strip club, so there you go.
Right, and the rooms were rented out, by the week, by the night, and by the hour. So anyway, I lived there for several years, and when I quit working at the tea room, I worked at Larry's Hideaway on the night, 4 nights a week on the front desk, in exchange for room and board. So that way I wouldn't have to, that way I was totally relying on my ability to draw readings. And that way I was guaranteed that I would have a place to live and food to eat. So when there was a fight in the bar, which was quite often, any of the males that were on duty at the time, the rule is if there's a fight in the bar, your job is to be there and help break it up. So if there was a fight, I'd go down. And we also had security there, but we had to participate. I had this fantasy of there being a big barroom brawl, and I get the call, and I go downstairs into the bar, and I raise my hands up, and I send out the love and peace energy, and the fight stops. Well, I never actually did it at Larry's, but I fantasized about it. I just do it the regular way. Now, what I did do, though, by the way, doing miracles, walking on waters like the gold medal round of miracles. Mm-hmm. And when you do a miracle like that one, you get to stand on the pedestal and they put a gold medal around, they play the national anthem or whatever. That's the big one. But the guy that can do that didn't start doing that. The guy that did that started way back practicing with the little ones. So I started becoming aware of people's energies. Really fascinated. And over the years, I would see people getting into conflicts. And I would go over and being the clairsentient or the feeling empath that I am, I went over and I would stand near people while they were going through their paces. And I would watch their energy. I was fascinated with their energy, how it would rise, and something would change in the energy, and they would stop or start. And there would be a tipping point that things would, and it was really fascinating to start watching how that energy worked. And I practiced that 25 years. Maybe longer. And I would be in situations and I would see, something happening, and I would just throw a little bit of energy and distract the people, and they'd stop. And that. So there was one time, and I was doing it more and more and more. So there was this one time, I woke up one Saturday morning. It was a few years ago. And I just had to bake. I just had to bake a coconut cream pie. I just had to do it, and I had to use a fresh coconut. So I started driving around to all the grocery stores in my neighborhood, and see, this is about timing. It's all about timing. That's why I'm telling you. So I just went from one store to the other, couldn't find a bloody coconut, and then I thought, oh, there is one that will have a coconut there, I know for sure. So I drive there, and it's in a strip mall. And then there's a walkway, and there's the entrance to the grocery store. As I got out of my car, started walking towards the grocery store, there were a group of young men, 15 or 20, and they were in their late teens. And they were in a group, and they were chanting, and they were revving themselves up. And I was watching these, and I was thinking to myself, what the fuck are these kids doing?
Yeah.
You know, like that was what I was thinking. You know, what are these? What the hell are they doing? And so I walked over a little bit around the circle, and I looked up, and there they were directing their energy towards a wall in the walkway to get into the store. And then I saw a bicycle rack, and I saw a dog tied to the bicycle rack. And they were directing that energy at the dog. And that dog was really afraid. And these guys were, I don't know what they were doing, but these guys were working themselves up, and the energy was quite negative. And it was a sense of violence. And I just watched these guys for a moment. And I walked right into the middle of the group. Right smack dab in the middle. And I just stood there. And this kind of looked around, and I had no personal feelings towards anybody. I just stood there, and I finally made eye contact with who looked like the leader. And he said to me, "Is that your dog?" And I said, "No, but he's a friend of mine." And the guy looked at me, and all of a sudden, the energy just went pop, like that, like a balloon bursting, and it just fizzled out. And I walked out of the group and over to the dog, and when I turned around, the group had started to dissipate, and I was standing beside the dog, patting the dog. He was really happy to see me. And I was patting the dog for a moment or two, and then his owner came out, and I looked at him, and I said, "Oh, if only your dog could talk." And then I said, "What a beautiful dog," and went into the store and got my coconut. So was that a miracle? No, it wasn't.
What the heck were they chanting, and why to the dog? I don't understand.
I didn't care.
Reminds me a little of Men Who Stare at Goats.
Okay.
Remember the movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
I didn't see it.
Stargate Project. Well,
yeah, it's a remote
it was about
viewing.
a government project where they were teaching people to remote view, and they would look at a goat. Some of the guys had the skill where they would look at the goat in the eye, and the goat would.
Okay. Well, the energy from them they wanted to cause harm. They wanted to hurt the dog, and the dog knew that. I was interested. I didn't have an opinion about them, one way or the other. If I would have, they would have attacked me.
You really
Robert.
Yes.
I was going to say, what would you recommend to people who are new at this, that want to become psychic? Maybe they don't have the opportunity to work in the tea rooms, but they want to get out there and do something. What would you recommend they do or read, or what are some good steps? Maybe they have a natural inclination.
Okay. Do readings.
Just keep practicing.
Just do it. Just do it. So if now a lot of people, I guess, starting off would need to have cards or palm, or something like that. But just practice it. Or when you go out during the day, look at people. Look at their face. Look at how they move. Look at what they're doing. Sense how they feel. Watch them. Now, don't stalk them. Right? I'm not telling you to be doing that. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar, right? So watch. Just watch how they are. I find it fascinating watching people and interact, and so just watch them and look at them, and see what's clear about them. Another thing that you can do is get some old pictures of people, and every day focus on a face of someone in an old picture, and look at it. Don't stare at it and burn your eyeballs out, but look at it and look at that picture. Older the better, and ask yourself, what does that person feel? What type of person is this? And just practice identifying and expressing. And the big thing is identify and then say it. If you don't say it, you'll forget it. If you don't say it, you won't learn it. You gotta say it. So you say it out loud to yourself. Like, say it out loud when you're looking and saying, oh, yes, that person looks like. Say
just start talking, kind of like let it go, right? Like
what I'm doing right now.
To whatever words bubble up, let them out.
Right. That's right.
That kind of thing. So
That's
almost
right.
like a stream of consciousness.
That's right.
To get to that gut instinct and feeling you have about it.
Yeah.
You're observing.
Right.
Did you have any influential psychics when you were coming of age?
Well, Red Hawk, when I talked about him at the tea room, he was generous with me in that if he had a private, private readings or parties, he would take me with him, and
Leg attached, I'm assuming. Leg attached, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, he did. Yeah. And he never worried about losing it at the places when Mrs. Cox wasn't there. And that helped a lot. A lot of the things that he did, I learned not to do. And so a lot of things I learned from him was what not to do.
No, that's good. That's
very good. One of the things that I learned from him, because I worked down the hall from the guy for 5 years, and I listened to him during his readings. He had a similar pattern, and he used it in every reading. And that was one of the things that I learned. Holy shit! You better have a whole bunch of ways of saying something, rather than just the same way every single time. And then when you have just one way of saying it, then eventually all you do is keep saying that and you don't grow. So I learned that from the guy's name. His real name was Laurie Claus. He was a good guy.
Sounds like such a fascinating time too.
It was
in the tea rooms, and I wish I could have been a fly on the wall.
It was wild. It was wild. And we were in those days kind of treated, and me especially because of my age, it's like being a musician at a bar with all the benefits. Now, I didn't drink nearly as much then as I had done. And I don't drink at all now, but now everybody likes me again. So now other people have fun. So it's been almost 20 years. But
great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, then other people got to have fun instead of me, being a jerk. I forgot what I was saying. Anyway, I forgot what you were saying. So I, and a lot of times I learn by watching what other people do, and not do it. And then so here's what happens when somebody books a reading with me online. Okay, so they'll find my email and they'll say I'm interested in an appointment. So I will send them back a letter, and it's the same letter, but I write it out the same way myself. But it's the same. I use the same letter, but I write it out myself. And I tell them what the readings, what they can expect in the reading. I tell them everything about it and how much it is. And then I send them that email. And if they say yes, then what happens is and they'll tell me a time, and I'll offer them that appointment. When they accept it, I then send them an email saying, this is what to expect on the day of your reading. 1 hour before our appointment, I'll send a PayPal invoice. At about 30 minutes before your reading, I'll send you an email telling you I am now preparing to do your reading. At 5 minutes to your appointment, I'll be sending you a Zoom invitation And then if you don't see it, check your junk mail. And on the hour at 2:00, your reading will begin. And then I also say, if I'm delayed more than 90 seconds, I will let you know. And then what I do is exactly what I said I would do. So that they're sitting there not wondering, oh, is he going to do it? Will he not do it? When I say I'm going to send you at 1:00, you get the invoice. At 1:30, I'm going to tell you I started to prepare for your reading. They get that. And then they get the 5-minute one. They know that I can be trusted. And more importantly than that, they're not worried. They're not stressed. They're just all relaxed and ready to go. So,
it's a great plan to have.
Pardon?
That's a wonderful plan to have.
That's what I do. Yeah.
And people can do this at robertlindsymilne.com.
It's up in
or
the
find
chat.
you on social media. It's ROBERTLINDSYMILNE.com. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out there. The Lindsay, we spell that a few different ways, so I want to make sure people know. This does go to a podcast. Some people will hear only audio, and it helps them to understand.
I do two things, and I've done this since I was about mid-20s, and I'm 72 now. I do two things. I guarantee my readings absolutely. And that means that if now I don't say I'm 100% accurate. What I say is I guarantee that from the time I do that person's reading until the ending of my life or theirs, hopefully theirs first, I will, if for any reason, regardless of the reason, if they feel the service I gave for them it was not of value, then I'll give you back your money. Just like that. Now,
you've only done that twice in your life.
Oh, I hated them both too. And I've been doing that since I was about, I did that in the tea room. If I thought I did a shitty reading for somebody, we used to get, the way that we would get paid, or the way that they would market, each one of us had they used poker chips, and mine were turquoise. So every time someone got a tea leaf reading and a card reading, they would give me their chip. And then at the end of the night, we'd cash them in. If I did a lousy reading for somebody, I gave them back the chip and said, go to somebody else. So I've done that as long as. Now, it wasn't in those days, it wasn't that I had such great morals. It was that I was trying to prove to my dad that I was honest and legitimate.
Make him proud.
Didn't work, but yes, that was one of my reasons. That was my big reason. So I guarantee that for any reason you feel the service I've given you was not of value, I'll give you your money back. But if I did a reading for you 30 years ago, you're going to get the principal of 30 years ago. You're not going to get the money I get paid.
Oh,
no, you get your principal back. But so and it happens. And now there are times where I know I'm not doing a good reading, and I stop and I apologize and I tell. And people now that I do a lot of readings online, they pay first. But when you come to me in person, I don't get paid until the reading's over, till they get the recording and they put the money in my hand and say, okay, I'm satisfied. Then they give it to me. And I've done that at least 15% of the time, where I'd be doing a reading, I'm saying, I'm sorry, it's not good enough, or I'm not tuning in, or and I would stop.
That's nice of you, because that's not legit. Yeah.
You're going to get a good reading.
Exactly.
You're going to get the best that I can do, or you're not going to get it. That's where I'm at.
Robert Ricky had a quick question, and there are a lot of Roberts. I mean, we got you, Robert, and we got Robert Ricky. We've got Robert Holdings. Robert Ricky asks, after leaving the tea room, did you ever go back to visit?
Yep. So the very first day, the guy was a cocky little son of a bitch. The very first day I started, after the afternoon shift, we were having a hot dinner, and we're sitting around the table, and there was Mrs. Cox and Mr. Cox. He was a retired RCMP constable. So there'd be Mr. Cox, Mrs. Cox, Grace, Pearl, and all the readers. And that first night, I looked around and said, "You're going to tell everybody this is where I started," and I did that, and I believed it. So. Years later, when there was a period where I became really successful, and I had a monthly spot on the highest rated TV show in Canada, and like I was booked like 10 months in advance, and I was really making a lot of money, and then I was still touring, and I decided to go to the Cosy Tea Room one time, and I went there in a limousine.
Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, it was just,
I went there in style.
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
I love that. I love that.
yeah.
Well, the website.
So the other thing, I just want to say, the other thing that I do that I don't know of any other psychics do, after I finish the reading, I then say, over the next year, if you have any questions, and within reason, I feel free to call me. You can ask your questions. There's no extra charge. It's part of the service I provide, and I do that.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
That's
So
wonderful, Robert.
we,
We love you.
we love having you on,
Yeah.
and it's been
Thank you.
really great to talk again. It's been
Thank
so
you.
long.
I think you're doing more of the listening tonight.
You do it
Oh, that's
definitely. You've
wonderful.
got
We like that.
Come on, I had a lot
Yeah.
to say. Sorry,
Yeah.
we appreciate it, and we're honored to have you on our show.
Absolutely.
Once again, and the website is www.robertlindsymilne.com. The podcast is My Side of the Crystal Ball, and I imagine that's available pretty much wherever you get podcasts.
That's right. On pretty much anywhere. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and regular
Excellent.
podcast sites. Just one other thing. My Side of the Crystal Ball. Are we out of time again? Are we doing the closing?
We actually are running out of
we're
time.
over.
Okay, well, My Side of the Crystal Ball is about what other people are doing, and I talk to them as a psychic, and sharing. We talk about how we do stuff together. It's about other people in my learning.
Yeah, I think you just had Kimberly McGeorge
Yes.
on. recently.
Yes, she did. We talked about cloning.
She's a great guest.
Yeah.
Is she great?
Yeah, she's awesome.
fun.
We had a lot of fun talking to her.
Yeah.
Yep. You look like you had some great guests lined up.
Yeah,
So-
I did.
So,
We appreciate it. We
Yeah.
Thank you.
stick around, of course, because we have
Yes,
somebody that
Jacob.
is looking forward to saying hello to you.
Yes.
Okay. great.
The rest of you, I think we have June Lundgren on next week.
I think so.
I believe so.
Yes.
I believe so.
Who?
We will be back next Saturday.
June Lundgren.
June Lundgren, the Demon Seer.
Yes.
And we'll be back next Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So thank you, folks. Have a great week. We've been Bigfoot and the Bunny, and it's been real.
Happy
Thanks.
Saturday. Thank you very
Happy
much.
Saturday. Oh, and real quick, I want to say happy birthday to
Miss
Mrs. Elaine
Elaine
Carr,
Carr.
who may be listening, may or may not be listening right now. They might be out whooping it up. And that is my parents.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Happy
So,
birthday, Elaine.
thank you.